Hi and welcome to the first sunny day this summer in Switzerland. The weather is gorgeous, but I'm going to be inside for a while to share my favorite art books with you. As soon as I'm done though, I will be heading out to enjoy the sunshine. For now, let's have a look at what I have been using as references to guide me on my watercolor journey so far. Tonight's reading hour is presented to you by Renly. So, I started watercolor painting a year and a half ago, and I bought a few books to begin with because I had no idea what I was doing or where to start. And over the past 18 months, I have managed to gather up quite a collection. Earlier, when I was gathering up all the books, I was surprised at what an armful I have. So I have tried to sort them into 3 piles that are roughly chronological, and then we can just quickly go through the books and you can see if there are any that inspire you. And so when I began painting with watercolor, I was looking for recommendations in various places, social media, Domestika. I tried a few Domestika courses that I'll talk a bit more about in a moment. And from the recommendations I gathered, I ordered my first 4 watercolor books. 2 of them were a bit of a hit and miss for a beginner, and you will see why. So the very first 2 I ordered, the first one is Watercolor Lessons by Lefebvre, and it's 20 tutorials of how to paint and unwind with watercolor. She is an artist that I follow on YouTube. I did a lot of her tutorials in the beginning when I was starting, and I will share everyone's social media links below because a lot of these people have social media accounts that are worth looking at. So this is a book of 20 watercolor lessons that is very nicely illustrated. It's a simple, very beginner-friendly book where Emma has the cutest hand-drawn illustrations, for example, of her materials. And as a beginner, I truly appreciated this introduction. Sorry for the madness in the background. I truly appreciated this very basic introduction to some of the materials and the supplies, and then also the techniques. So there's basic watercolor techniques, brush strokes, and a few drills to practice this. So this was a very good first step, and I really enjoyed the positive little messages and the cute little illustrations. There's no wrong way to paint, just go for it. So it was very encouraging. And the actual lessons themselves, there are 20 lessons for which there is a lot of preparation because she does explain color theory and the techniques in quite a lot of detail, hot and warm colors, color mixing. So you do get a very good beginner's foundation. And then the actual lessons are set up in a step-by-step process. You get the color palette, how to mix it, and then there's a step-by-step follow-along process. So the compositions, the actual pictures themselves that you'll be drawing are quite simple. They're not too complex, they're not too detailed. To show you a few. A lot of it is floral and botanical. And as you can see, they are relatively simple. It's usually one item, one object. There's not really going to be any full scenes. It's more of a one item, one object. So you have the explanations. The first part of the book is dedicated to technical explanations. The second part of the book is dedicated to the lessons. And then the third part of the book, hang on, here we're at landscapes. I just want to get to the end of the book for you. There's some very interesting ocean scenes that I found very difficult in the beginning. Some food, there are some donuts, cupcakes, little Rubin. And then here at the end you have the tracing pages. So for all of the pictures, you can trace step by step the projects onto your paper, which is quite a useful tool. So that is everything contained in here, and I found it very beginner friendly. The second book I ordered that I also found very beginner friendly was the one from Sarah Simon, who really needs no introduction. She's known as TheMintGardener on social media. She has a lovely Instagram account. She's also on Patreon, where I follow her. And she runs a 100-day challenge where every week she uploads onto her Dropbox pictures as prompts for a daily drawing. And every day the aim is to do a quick sketch of the daily prompt or daily picture and share it on Instagram. I have been terrible at starting this. I have wanted to start the 100-day project forever, but for now I admire everyone else's 100-day projects and have not yet had the discipline to take part of the 100-day challenge. The Watercolor Workbook, she has several books. I think she has 3 out by now. The latest one came out quite recently. It's Cafes in Bloom, and it looked really nice. I haven't picked it up yet. I probably will. But this is her Watercolor Workbook, 30-minute beginner botanical projects on premium watercolor paper. So the interesting part about this book is you can see that there's a portion of the book with normal paper, and then there's this portion of the book with thick watercolor paper. So you paint directly into the book. The first part of the book explains, again, materials and techniques. It's pretty standard, quite similar to the previous book we looked at. So there'll be an explanation of the basic watercolor materials and the basic techniques. The layout is quite nice. I like the way she's written it out. And then we get to the explanations. And this is where I found this book to have a very beginner-friendly approach, and I found it quite innovative. I really enjoyed the idea of painting directly into the book. When I received the book, however, I was unable to. For me, books have always been, there's been a certain sanctity about the printed medium. And a book has always been a bit of a sacred object to me, and I actually was unable to bring myself to paint into it. I have been very precious about it. I've looked at it, I've traced it out, I have made my own sketches of it. I haven't painted directly into it because I actually find it to be quite a pretty item, and I haven't actually allowed myself to paint directly into it. However, if you're using it as intended, it's very nice that you can swatch your own colors underneath her color recipes. And then she details out the projects one by one. She will explain between loose and tight painting, and she'll provide you with the color recipes for mixing the colors you'll be using in the projects. And then the actual projects themselves are mostly botanical or floral. I love this eucalyptus. And she'll provide you with the color palette, and you've already had the mixes at the beginning, so you will swatch out your own colors underneath for comparison. These lovely foxgloves. And you've got some very nice pictures, and this is already starting to be a little bit more elaborate. The subjects are already a bit more complex. Some of them, there's an actual composition going on. It's not just a single item alone on a page, like one tree or one flower. There's already a bit of a constructed image going on. So this was quite a nice step, and I found that these two worked very well, one after the other, these two books, especially if you're less precious and you're okay to paint right into the book. It's a very nice way to just jump right in and do the relaxing painting part without having to worry about the drawing and tracing part. So that is quite nice if the sketching part is not your forte and you just want to take out your paintbrush and start painting. It's a very good way to hop in. The other 2 books I ordered with my very first book order, I must say I was out of my depth. And let me grab these 2. So I had this dream initially of being one of these cool girls who strolls around town with a little painting book, sketchbook, and a little painting palette or a little watercolor palette. And I would do urban sketching because I think the urban sketching girls look really cool. Well, as a beginner, that was not within my capacities, and I had not really understood the difficulties and nuances of this. However, I did admire Felix Scheinberger, and I still do. I admire him tremendously, and I loved his book. I really enjoy his style. He's got strong, expressive lines, bright, splashy colors, and he's got very humoristic designs. He is a perfect, I think he's a perfect example of how to add character and humor into your subject. He's a very, very good observer of the world around him that you will notice in his work. and he infuses his work with a lot of dynamic character. I mean, just look at that. I cannot look at his work without smiling. My parents. So he really has a sense of humor in his work, and I find that his work has such character and it captivates me. It's deceptively simple and messy, yet very impactful and very expressive. The book itself, so it contained a lot of very good technical explanations. Of course, introductions to material, but going into a lot more depth. So he plunges into explanations about the pigments, their origins, the binders, holding the pigments together. So this is a part where he talks about the actual colors and the pigments and their origins, which brings me to, for example, of bugs and snails, where they would crush bugs for cochineal red. This is also a topic that I'm not so happy about, that some brands, such as Schminke, are now re-editing retro paints made of crushed beetles, whereas we have perfectly acceptable light, fast red paints that are not made of crushed animals. But yes, so pigments, binders, so you get a very good technical background on what watercolor is. He also goes into other mediums, and then he starts talking about the actual techniques. And so he will talk in much more depth about applying paint, lifting paint, washes, blending, wet on wet. So it's a much more technical book. There is a lot of details, and I would say you already need a bit of a technical base to truly appreciate the information in here. And of course, the beautiful illustrations are a help. It does keep you motivated. But this is definitely not something that I was able to produce in the first few months of watercolor painting. So this was really overambitious. I had bitten off more than I could chew. But it's a very good masterclass also on composition and stylistic design. So you will, as you read through the book, you'll be finding yourself exposed a lot to different ways of planning paintings, planning colors, and planning how you present what you see, which is what really adds a character to the work. I'm still very far away from being anywhere near this level, and it is useful. I'm very happy to have this to work on progressively. Sorry about the little barking in the background. And my goal is so there is a lot of style exploration. My goal is to actually become someone who is comfortable with sketching in a public scenario at some point. For now, I have mastered this on the train, and I'm quite comfortable sketching away on the train. But I am still a bit of a ways off before I sit down at a cafe and pop out my sketchbook and palette and start sketching the people around me. That is still something that feels very intimidating to me. So if you have any tips on how to be comfortable while painting in public amongst strangers, I am open to that, because for now the train has been the furthest I have gone out of my comfort zone. And overall this book I find to be a treasure trove of sort of wild and free expression. I also enjoy the mixed media kit that he details, that he takes with him. I have started collecting, and in last week's video in my art hall unboxing, it was my first real mixed media supplies. So now I can also start assembling a bit of a mixed media kit to take with me. But for now I have been limited to watercolors and a graphite pencil and a sketchbook. So that has usually been my little carry-along equipment in my bag. But now I can start setting up an actual multimedia sketchers palette. So that is also in the goals for later on this year. And so I would say overall a beautiful book, lots of character, but once again quite ambitious. And the fourth book, that was part of my initial purchase, I had absolutely, how shall I put this? I had absolutely overestimated what I would need or be capable of. So I had heard this recommendation from an artist I follow on YouTube. I cannot remember who it was, but because it's an artist I love and admire, I really had to go look at the book myself. And I found it on Amazon. I had a bit of trouble finding this book. in Switzerland, but I did manage to locate it on Amazon, and it's called How to Make a Watercolor Paint Itself by Nita Engle, who is a very renowned and very talented watercolorist. The book itself and Nita's work is absolutely gorgeous, and she is really known for her very textured, very experimental landscapes. So to show you a few examples, she has landscapes that are almost abstract, quite loose, and done with quite experimental techniques. Yet when you step away, the eye immediately recognizes it, and it makes perfect sense. Hello there. And so she also has a bit of an academic introduction to this. Let me just move the camera a bit. There we go. So there's an explanation again about materials, paper, and technique. But then she goes straight on to talking about her approach and her technique. And as you can see, this is a different level of painting. So this is no longer the small sketchbook style. This is not beginner friendly, let's be honest. So she is someone who was traditionally working on large pieces of watercolor paper, spraying the paint directly on it, spraying copious amounts of water onto it, throwing salt onto it, turning her paper upside down. And so she was very experimental. She would scrape the paint off with a knife, and she was very, I would say she really showed me or gave me the idea in the beginning that watercolor can really be pushed and used in many different ways, almost used and abused even. And I truly regret, you can see a bit of the knife scraping going on here, what I truly regret is that there's not more filmed material. I had a lot of trouble finding videos of Nita painting, unfortunately. I did manage to find one that was quite complete and that was very interesting. But most of them are fragments or smaller portions. I've had trouble finding full videos of her process. But her energy is lovely, and she had a great sense of humor on the videos that I've seen. And I really wish there was more filmed material. The process, however, as you can see, is messy. That's wiping up a bunch of paint. And that's what I saw from the video as well, is that there is a lot of splattering of water and paint going on. And you kind of need a bigger area for this. I don't see myself doing this in a sketchbook, and I certainly don't see myself having the technical level of starting to learn these techniques yet. This is definitely far above my level, and I would say it's inspiration. I enjoy her humor, I enjoy her work, but it's definitely not the book that was going to be giving me practical lessons. This is actually one of the videos of hers that I saw, where she paints a village street scene, which starts with what looks like a bullseye. And I was completely mystified when I watched the video, thinking, how on earth was this ever going to look like a realistic street scene? And then she copiously sprays it with water, she rotates it upside down to the side, lets it dry, and then she starts carving out the negative space in it. And suddenly, lo and behold, a beautiful village street emerges. And this is the magic of her work. You start with something, and this is why actually I'm at a loss for words here, but this is why she keeps talking about how to make a watercolor paint itself. And in the video as well, she says the same thing. You let the paint flow, and she manipulates the paint in a way that the painting emerges by itself. And of course, that idea is very attractive, but I think there is no magic in watercolor or in any other technique. Actually, I don't think there's a secret where a painting will emerge on its own. It's a lot of hours of practice and hard work and dedication, and she certainly had that. And her work is absolutely beautiful. I truly enjoy looking at her landscapes. I truly enjoy looking at her use of light and shadow. It is quite magical, and she creates beautiful atmospheres, but definitely not the right book for a complete beginner. This is definitely advanced level. So here I had really bitten off more than I could possibly chew, and I'm very happy to have this book as a guide for later on the path. the same way I'm using the Urban Watercolor sketching book now and in the future. So these were definitely future investments at the time I bought them. By this time, I had started finding more artists whose work resonated with me and whose styles I found approachable and easy enough, and whose styles actually I liked enough to want to emulate. So the next set of books I started purchasing was from artists whose work I wanted to learn more about, whose process I wanted to explore, and whose work I wanted to emulate. So I had to pop off camera for a moment because I wanted to grab my sketchbooks, because I want to show you a few pieces for the next book. So these were the books from the artists that I follow and wanted to emulate. And the first one is Painting Calm by Inga Buividavice. It's her first book. She has published a second one, which we will see next. And this one is about painting botanicals in watercolor. The book itself is definitely a trophy item. As you can see, there's this beautiful blue foil on the title, and there's the same on the spine. And her work is very charming. I truly enjoy her color palettes, and her work is very loose and beautiful. So I had discovered her on Domestika through a course that she offers in painting a loose floral meadow. And initially I was skeptical. I'm not a floral girl by nature, but her course had truly captivated me. I learned a lot from it, and obviously when the book came out, I fell in love and had to order it. It's beautifully illustrated, even just as a collector's item. This is a lovely book to have on your shelf. But also I found the exercises a little bit different and unique. And there was a lot of information here that for me specifically was interesting. By now I felt like I had a good grasp of things like the basic materials, the basic brush strokes, yet still I found her brush drills useful, and still I found her techniques useful. So the technical explanations, not so much because I didn't know what wet on wet was or because I didn't know what glazing was, but because the exercises she provided for them, I found actually a lot of fun. So I would say that simply this was the one I had the most fun with. She made it look nice. She really made the exercise look pretty and unique in a way that I hadn't seen anyone else do before. And she made me embrace things like blooms and backwashes and using my paint water and not emptying out and cleaning out my paint water all the time. And she also convinced me of the importance of using clear water when painting and lightening my pigment load. So one of the exercises in familiarizing yourself with the pigments that she proposes was making these little planets, and she then decorated them with Posca pen and colored pencil. This, for example, who would have guessed something so simple? I had so much fun with this. So I truly enjoyed her lessons in terms of how fun they were. And I found her exercises and her style very easygoing, very, very loose. The absence of overly controlling it really made it enjoyable. It took out the stress element and it made everything flow and look beautiful. Well, hers looks beautiful. I tried. And the color part, this is what I wanted to mention that I found particularly useful. I think it's linked to the fact that she is a designer by trade, but she has a very good eye for composition and color composition. So I found very useful the chapter about the color proportions and also the chapter about how to compose your painting, like the dynamic flow of the painting. And I think I may have already skipped past that. Her color palette, as I said in the beginning, is so beautiful. And of course, I really like the fact that the shapes are simplified. They're almost childlike. There's a beautiful simplicity to it, which also makes it good for a beginner because you feel confident enough to replicate, the simple shapes and just let the watercolor do all the talking. And of course, her subject material is really beautiful. I'm showing you these because A lot of these are things that I had a lot of fun with in the beginning for myself, and I'll actually show you what some of that looks like. Another special treat, both in the book and on Instagram, is when she shares pictures of her sketchbooks, because this is beautiful. She has beautiful sketchbooks with beautiful handmade paper, and I love seeing her process. I love seeing her sketches. So I think that she has beautiful work. And this is a composition part, I think, that I was mentioning, looking at the dynamics and composition of the pictures. So this I found useful because by now I was starting to think of painting pieces and not just little items isolated on their own, like one flower or one fruit. I wanted to start making actual pictures, and I found this very useful. And then after the explanations, there are projects, so there are structured lessons or projects to follow here, and they are increasing in complexity. So the first one is foliage in different seasons. You have winter, spring, and summer, and look at that spring, those colors, and summer. It truly is beautiful. And then this leads up to the leaf mandala at the end, which is what you saw on the cover. And then the next chapter, the next project, is trees. Look at those fluffy trees. So you will learn to paint a few different trees, and then that builds up into making a little landscape with trees and flowers as well. You start with single flowers to practice some flower sketching, different types. And she encourages you in the book and in the course to find your own inspiration and your own flowers in nature and to practice your own sketching, which is what I did. And it's become a go-to step when I don't know what to do and I'm stuck on how to progress and find my next idea. I often go back to sketching something I've picked up during a walk. It's a good way. I'll find some little treasures during my walk, some fallen leaves and or a fern branch, and I'll bring it home and paint it. So yeah, the flowers leads up again to a flower composition, and there's a flower meadow at the end. And look at these colors. Her color palette is so gorgeous. This is very similar to what she does on her Domestica course. It leads up to a flower meadow as well. And then of course it becomes, as you have seen, increasingly complex. So this is definitely, I would say, a beginner to intermediate book, or maybe for the intermediate to advanced beginner. The color mixing already is more subtle, more nuanced. You will be mixing up more shades of more colors, and you will be layering more. She also introduces masking fluid, and you will be exploring composition much more in depth. So this I found to be very useful at that point, where I wanted to start exploring assembling objects. And when her next book, before we move on, so just to show you an example in my sketchbook of what these exercises look like when you're doing them, this was the one where we were just doing, she guides you through the different painting techniques such as glazing and too much water, or lifting, or dry brushing and salt, different drying times. So this was a very basic crash course, but it was fun. And then we moved on to exercises like the planets that we've seen. For me, it was a moment to discover some of my pigments and to start playing with things like decorating blobs and just having fun. I was trying to have some sort of watermelon planets here, I see. And so this is really the beginnings for me. I was such a beginner here. I did not have the faintest clue about my pigments. I didn't know what I was doing. And this actually made it very stress-free and very fun. And I started experimenting for the first time with things like splattering or Posca pen, which was new for me. And I can show you sort of the progression. By then I was feeling a little bit more liberated. I was mixing my colors, I hope, a little bit better. I tend to think that there's a bit of progress. I hope there is. And so then by then I was moving on to the moths, and by the end of the book, I think I finished yes, I was moving on to being a bit more and more wild. This was the salt and splattering session. And in her second book, which I'll show you in a moment, what I truly appreciate is it's the first book that I've ever found that dedicates a double-page spread to splattering. Different sizes, different shapes, different orientation. Because splattering is something that I find to be unmasterable. I have no control over it, but I really love it. And I had a lot of fun trying to reproduce this. And that was just over a year ago. And I ended the sketchbook actually with a spread inspired by her simplified plant sketches. I had been working, so she does recommend the plant sketching, and this is some of what I was doing as plant sketching at that time. And in the subsequent sketchbook, I also carried on doing some of the sketching inspired by her. I was doing some pears. These are very much the same style as from her book, which I really enjoyed. As well as the ginkgo, I really had fun with these. And these are very good exercises to try. They're very relaxing. And same as this one, you will probably recognize from the book. This was my attempt to reproduce it. You may also notice that this sketchbook is labeled in colors such as browns and greens. And I have a confession to make. I did a crazy thing last year. I wanted to test every Daniel Smith color of watercolor under the sun. So I ordered the 238 color dot card sheets. And instead of swatching the 238 colors, I decided to make a sketch with every single one of the 238 colors, because for me that was the best way I would understand them. It took me about 9 months. It taught me watercolor the way I know it now, and it truly was a labor of love. And this is a separate project that I will share at some point in the future, because there are 238 colors to go through, each one having been tested in a separate sketch. So that will be for the future, but that is why this particular sketchbook is color oriented. That will be for the future, but that is an example of some of the work you will be doing if you're following along with this book. And her second book, when it came out, of course, I had to buy it as well. So while the first one was dedicated to botanicals, the second one, called Wild Watercolor, also with a beautiful foiled title and spine, is dedicated to animals. I found this one to be a bit of a more substantial book. It contains, I think, a bit more information, and it's a bit more advanced. So I found that the two follow each other quite spontaneously, quite naturally. And here is the page about the splattering, which I have not found in any other book, and I found this joyful. So there is again some explanations about material and techniques, and again the illustrations are gorgeous. Look at that little lemur. There's also the cutest little red panda at the back. Look at that guy. What I did enjoy was getting glimpses as well into her process. So I enjoyed seeing her sketches. On Instagram from time to time, she would share her sketches of her subjects, like when she would go to the zoo and take some photos of this red panda, for example, and she would go home and sketch him, and how from a visit to the zoo that would work up to a finished painting were glimpses of her process that I truly enjoyed. So she does talk about that in the book as well. Look at this little otter. So I found it actually technically a bit more complex than the first book, but so beautiful to look at. And the projects as well I found to be a lot of fun. I see that her style carries on developing. It is becoming less muted, more colorful, more vibrant. And also I see lately on social media that she is painting landscapes. So I wonder if there will be a third book about landscapes coming out. I hope so, because landscapes is something I do not master, so I would not mind some more guidance. And then the projects, once again, like the first book, it is broken down into different projects, which I find a little bit more worked up now. I find that there's more thought about the background, and more thought about the environment in which the animals are placed. And oh, this was lovely. Actually, this work of hers, which is a collage of koi fish, was featured, can't remember the name, it was featured on some art magazine, and it really is cover worthy, I agree. But this I did not do, and I will not do, because I hate collage. It's not because I hate looking at it, I think it's beautiful, I just hate doing it because my hands hurt from cutting out. I get terrible wrist pain after I spend 2 minutes cutting with scissors, and I cannot do this without suffering. So I'm boycotting the collage just for pain reasons. And the other projects I follow along very happily, I really enjoyed it. This one, for example, I found particularly beautiful. The snake had the most beautiful florals around it at the end. So it really is beautiful. There we go. Some of this finished work is gorgeous. And I really enjoyed the subject matters she chooses. I mean, the animals are always very cute, and I do like the way they're more worked up and framed into their environment. So that's a bit of a glimpse into this book, which I find to be a work of art. And this was actually really interesting. The sort of worked in dolphin with the wave effects around him. So there really is more, I would say, more structure to this one, and it is a bit more advanced for someone progressing through their journey. This is adorable. This is definitely on my bucket list for the near future. But overall, her work is beautiful, and she's clearly a talented artist. So I cannot do anything other than admire her work and be very happy with this book. There was a final illustration that I wanted to share. There was a beautiful snake illustration. Look at this one. I truly love this one. Next, we have a book by a French artist, Sarah Van Der Linden, which I found in English. I'm very happy about it. She's actually known on social media. She has a website and her social media handle of Mirgli. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right again, but I'm trying. And this is her first book. It's actually really simple in terms of complexity. It's a good beginner's book, but I really enjoyed it. She has her own style, which is quite bright and colorful. And this one is on botanics. So this is Sarah. And she has, so this book is quite a small, simple little one. And I actually bought it relatively recently, even though I wouldn't say I need a basic beginner's book anymore, but I bought it because I truly liked her style and I wanted to go back to something pressure-free and fun. And you'll see why I say that. Because her work is exactly that. For example, using tape and just layering different botanical plants on to create beautiful frames. And these are very simple, very accessible drawings. But I really enjoyed, I think it's actually the simplicity that I enjoy so much. There's a certain naivete and carefree looseness. And looseness is really what I am looking for. I overwork everything. I have a tendency to put pressure on myself to produce realistic style work that's very detailed, very tight. And while the result may be okay, it's not so much the result that I care about, it's more the process, because I don't enjoy painting it that much when it's so tight and controlled. It may look good or it may look bad. I'm a little bit more detached about the final result because I don't sell my art, I do it actually for the process. And it's becoming really important to me to keep that process enjoyable, stress-free, and therapeutic. And that is exactly why I invested in this book, because it was simple, it was easy, it was carefree and therapeutic. This one, for example, I did a little 15-minute sketch of one evening in the kitchen, and I really enjoyed it. It was particularly balmy that day, and I managed, the drying times was super fast, so I managed to get it done really quickly. And I found it a lot of fun to show you the kind of thing you can create very quickly and easily without any pressure, and it's just a way of getting your paint onto your paper and getting your paintbrush moving on the paper. So I found this really good inspiration to just get my hand moving with the paintbrush and get into a flow. She did publish a second book though recently, and here we are on a different level. I haven't found this one in English. It's quite recent, so maybe it will be released in English at some point. But then again, I also think that art is kind of universal and the language doesn't matter as much as the pictures. So I was very happy to pick this one up as well. And this one is called Aquarelle d'un jardin à l'autre, aquarelles from one garden to the other. And so this is her handle on social media. And this one is a thick volume. And I was very pleased to see exactly how technically detailed this book is. This would definitely be for the intermediate to advanced beginner. There is quite a lot of explanation about getting to know your material, how to use your material, brush drills, a lot of brush drills. And then again, quite a bit of color theory. But what I did enjoy was the explanations of breaking down the elements. So there's a good portion of the book dedicated to individual elements, things like a branch, a leaf, and how to paint different effects. So creating, for example, halos, negative space. But then she starts breaking it down into the individual elements. And she shares her process as well, which is interesting because I haven't found much of her process in the previous book. And here you actually see more of her process. And then she starts teaching you to paint each type of plant individually. Look how pretty this is. And then she gives you sort of, I would say, a dictionary or an encyclopedia of plants and shapes to use that you then start assembling. So there's also this really interesting element here of creating your own library of separate elements. And then in the projects, you start assembling them. And this is really nice because this is what I'm also looking for, is to hone my skills on composition. I say hone, I mean develop. I'm definitely in the beginning stages. So I'm always looking for a book that can help me develop and create composition. And this did exactly that. I truly appreciated that it was broken down into explanations, practice, individual elements, and then working it up into compositions. And because it's about gardens, there's different types of gardens. So the one we're on right now is the English garden, for example. So she'll teach you how to paint the flowers characteristic of English gardens. And once again, I find that even if you're not necessarily a French speaker, the pictures speak for themselves. However, I do believe the book will be released in English since her first one has been released in English. There is no reason the second one should not be, but it may just still be too early. And then once again, you have the individual elements, and then you will assemble garden scenes with what you have learned. And her style is it's very simple, very simplified. And once again, simplification is something that I'm always striving towards. This, for example, is the wild garden. So this one will be dedicated to wildflowers. I'm having trouble paging through this book. It's actually quite a big volume. And there's even the inhabitants of the garden. So you will get the little bugs and beetles and insects and butterflies. And then you will be composing paintings with all of them. More or less realistic. The color palettes are quite whimsical. This one as well I found so beautiful. I really just wanted to doodle the other day in my sketchbook and ended up doing this because it was just so beautiful. And the autumn gardens as well. Rosehip, this is something I truly enjoy painting in every form. And so you will have several different types of gardens and compositions. The vegetable garden, this one was fun as well. So this one is definitely a larger project. There's definitely enough in this book to keep you busy for a long time, and I actually appreciate the fact that it is such a dense and complete work. And I found it truly nice, and the progression again between the first and second book was very pleasant. Another French book, the last one in French, is by Blanche Tristant. I was unable to find this one in English, and she's on social media under the name, I think her handle is L'eau bleue, but I will link it. I can't remember off the top of my head by now. She does YouTube videos as well, and she has a gorgeous loose painting style, and this one was about flowering gardens in watercolor. And I haven't started working on this one yet, on the actual projects. I have done individual pieces. I'm going to have to reposition. Please give me a moment. Sorry about that. I am not a professional contortionist nor a professional influencer. So sometimes I need to reposition. What I do enjoy is her little simple elements. She has very cute little potted flowers and flowers in baskets. And this is something that I wanted to just have as reference for when I want to doodle something simple. The entire garden scenes still intimidate me, so I'll show you those in a moment. So she again also does explanations about the techniques and her material, and she's got very nice snapshots of her sketches and her sketchbook, which to me is always a delight. I absolutely love seeing other artists' sketchbooks, especially when they're pretty like this, and hers are so neat. She's a very neat and perfectionist painter actually when you watch her on her vlog, and so seeing her work is a real pleasure. It's very delicate and very feminine. And this is actually really what I enjoyed. I love me a good potted plant painting. I absolutely love sketching potted plants, and I really enjoyed her style, so this has been fun for me. And it's been nice little sketches. I haven't done the complete works yet. I don't know if I will get to that point, but I will show them to you. So as well, here we have the idea of working up element by element, and it is done in a lesson format. So you have the color mixing chart, and then you'll have the sketches. You can also use these to print them, scan them, print them, and then you have outline. And each lesson will also talk about a specific technique, like negative painting, for example, or masking fluid or glazing. So there is a focus on a lot of the lessons. But then she starts assembling them into full garden scenes. And that's actually the part that is challenging, that interests me, but that I have not attempted yet. So here we're still in the individual trees. I love magnolia trees. This is one of my favorite trees of all time. Look at this beautiful mimosa. So these are things that I enjoy very much individually. And as you can see, her style is very loose. But then she starts putting them together in a whole garden. And these are very charming scenes. And I really need to try these one day. Also, I have an obsession. For anyone who is watching me on Instagram, you may know that I have a long-standing and hardcore obsession with window frames and door frames. They are structures that please me endlessly and fascinate me. And I share many references of window and door frames when I travel. And I have probably a folder dedicated to this by now, and I paint a lot of them. It's my favorite thing to paint is window and door frames, particularly when they're decorated with something like beautiful architecture or flowers. And this is right down my alley. But I just haven't done hers in particular yet. Although those who have seen any of my paintings on Instagram, you will recognize a certain similarity in choice of subject matter, so you will probably understand why this attracted me. And then come the big gardens, the wide gardens, and this, you're adding the difficulty of the perspective, the depth, and this to me is actually where it feels more technical, and this is really where I haven't taken the step yet. but I find it beautiful, and this is definitely a nice book to work on aquarelle gardens. And the next one, talking of simplification, I would call her the queen of simplification, Ohn Mar Win. This was a recent purchase. I actually unboxed it last week. It took months to arrive from Amazon, and I'm so happy with this. This is exactly, I would say, what the doctor prescribed, because it is low stress, easygoing, and I'm such a fan of her direct painting techniques. So you don't fidget with tracing, you don't fidget with a pencil sketch. You focus on shape, color, and value. And I really love her way of mixing watercolor with pen. It's very characteristic of her, and it's the reason I fell in love with her style. I mean, look at this mixture of just simple, basic shape, and then just the line work to enhance it. The contrast is beautiful, and I find it quite masterful. And I really admire actually the work she has done and the artistic journey that she has been down. She obviously has a lot of experience, and I have already spoken about her book in the previous video, so I'm probably fangirling out a little bit too much now, but I absolutely love her work, and I love this combination of watercolor and line work. And the projects are, again, simple, effective, and it brings you back to basics. I think that you can never have too much of the fundamentals. You can never master the fundamentals too much. And, you know, always coming back to the basics of shape and value, particularly shape and value. And color, of course, plays a big part, but shape and value, I think, is really the essentials. It's the first thing that I recognizes. And I think you can never work enough on that. Case in point, the eye immediately interprets the simplest of shapes and values, and giving the minimum of detail to the people viewing your art, you know, creating art with minimal detail that the viewer then interprets in their brain, because the eye is just getting the key points and then the brain is filling out the rest. I think is such an art form, because you tell a story with 2 or 3 strokes of the brush, and the story is there, it's clear, it's simple, and then the brain is filling in the rest. And that I find is really, it's really an art form, and also it's, I think, very friendly for the artist, because it allows you to be effective, it allows you to better manage your time, and it allows you to create something with more character that is maybe more open to interpretation by people. There's more freedom to it. And that's about this book. I think I need to stop here with this one, because I have already been talking a lot and I could talk a lot more about her. So maybe one day an Ohn Mar Win fangirl episode. But this is also a very nice book. If you want to loosen up, get into flow state and work on your basics, definitely a good place to stop. And the last one, I'm actually unboxing this right now with you. I was very happy to pick this one up. It's another French book, but I absolutely love this artist, Jennifer Lefebvre, and she is on Instagram and on YouTube. I will share her handle. She makes the most gorgeous illustrations of forest life. And this book also is a hefty tome. It's really a lot to keep you busy. And I was watching her process on Instagram, preparing this book and making her sketches for it. And I knew that I was going to love this. And I'm already smiling because I'm happy to have such a lot to work with, and because I love her illustrations. So let's get into it. So she does quite a bit of explanation already on YouTube about the papers she uses. She does quite a few paper reviews and sketchbook reviews, and she talks quite a bit about watercolors. I know she's a big fan of granulating watercolors. So when I was setting up my palette as well, I was of course looking at which of the granulating watercolors she uses, because I did want a few of the same pigments. But what I truly enjoy is the way she uses these. So she creates the most beautiful forest scenes that we will see right after the technical explanations. So the technical explanations I see are actually quite complete, and the illustrations that accompany them are very whimsical and very charming. And I expect that here as well, yes, there will be individual elements, so you won't be painting a whole forest right away. So you will do things like the ground with the moss and the plants, a drop, water mushrooms, and I see she talks about observing nature, but look at these illustrations. These are gorgeous. And also her notebook. And talking of sketchbooks, actually, she's the one who first introduced me to the Khadi paper sketchbooks that I tried for the first time last week. I feel like there's probably not going to be a point where I go back, because I have spent a week now doodling in a Khadi paper sketchbook, and it is a completely different experience. It's like painting on fabric. It's quite soft, and the water seeps into the paper and stays damp. So it doesn't puddle, it doesn't pool. You won't have like a big glaze on top of the paper, the shine. But the paper is damp, and you can keep pushing the pigments, you can keep lifting the pigments. You have much more time to work before it dries, and it's much more forgiving. So it's basically taking the emergency out of the watercolor to a large extent, and it makes it much easier. And I don't know why we don't encourage beginners, because the Khadi paper sketchbook I picked up cost under $10, and it is honestly the easiest sketchbook to paint on I've ever tried. It is the most beginner-friendly thing I have ever tried, and it's also the cheapest one I've ever purchased. And I don't understand why there's not more information out there for beginners about this. Nonetheless, she is the person who introduced me to these Khadi paper sketchbooks, and if you have not tried them, I can recommend them. And I will be doing a sketchbook, specifically sketchbook comparison and reviews, because this is something I realized that I wish I would have found when I began. And I think it's time to make one comparing things like Khadi paper versus Arches versus Etcher, versus Hahn-Müller. So I'll be making a specific sketchbook comparison, because people often compare things like the actual papers, but I would like to compare the sketchbooks themselves. And look at these beautiful illustrations of these little forest treasures. I truly love this. I'm sitting here with a smile on my face because I'm enchanted. I feel like a child with a new fairy tale book, except this one I get to paint from. So I see that here again there are individual elements, and it's done in a very whimsical style. You know, I could picture these as illustrations in some wonderful adventure story. And look at these beautiful, you know, the illustrations also, just decorating the pages, are themselves works of art. And let's flip through a bit more. I see there's also the inhabitants of the forest. So after the plants and vegetation, you get the little forest dwellers. And there's step-by-step details on how to paint them. And then I see exactly that she starts assembling them into actual compositions. This is beautiful. Now this is absolutely what I was hoping to learn and to see up close, and to add to my list of projects. Look at that fluffy texture that she manages to create here. Yeah, this is definitely, I love this mixture as well of mushrooms and crystals and ferns in bottles. There's such a magical atmosphere here, and this is definitely something that is giving me great joy to page through right now. From what I have seen of her work as well on YouTube, it does look accessible to beginners. I wouldn't say that it's the simplest, but it does look beginner accessible. Because she does do a lot of things like lifting the paint, she does move her pigments around a lot, and she paints with a lot of water, and her pigments are granulating. So all of that are the reasons that she gets these effects, and it is something that I would like to add to my repertoire as well. She's also quite known at the moment on Instagram. She's been having this moment where she does bubbles of forest, and so on a single sketchbook page she will paint bubbles of different forests. I find this very cute, actually. I haven't seen a lot of other people doing that. In fact, I haven't seen anyone else doing that, to my knowledge, on Instagram. And I really enjoy looking at it. And then some more forest scenes. There was a very nice winter forest. I wonder if it's here somewhere. Look how pretty this is as well, an autumn forest. Oh yes, and the winter forest. I've seen this actually on one of her social media pages. This is beautiful. And look at that spooky forest with the bats. So, and there we go. There's the artist, Jennifer. And she is on YouTube, she's Jenny Illustrations, and on Instagram, she's Jenny_illustrations. So I can definitely already recommend this book just for its beauty and because there is a lot of there's a lot to learn here. There's a lot of inspiration in these pages. So that has been quite a lengthy book presentation, longer than I expected. And we are actually only 2/3 of the way through, but I have left the shortest until last. These ones, the last 3 books, are not specifically watercolor dedicated, but I wanted to include them because they are art books that I have found useful. So the basis of painting and watercolor, I think, is sketching, and this is maybe something that is underrated. We talk a lot about how to paint with the brush, how to use the pigment and the water, and this is all important, especially in watercolor. Water control, pigment control, yes, this is important, but the basis for any painting is your drawing and sketching skill. It's your basis for drawing a straight line, a round circle, a basic shape. And this is the book that I picked up to help me work on my drawing skills. It's called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. I cannot give a final review on it because it is something that I have just started on recently. So it is a work in progress. I have my graphite sketchbook where I work in graphite pencil, and I have started some of the practices. But it is very academic, I would say. It's a very intellectual book. You will read through it and you will learn a lot. So there's a lot to absorb intellectually. And then, of course, there are exercises in order to absorb that. Things like drawing upside down or inversing the image. So I don't know yet everything inside it because this is the one that I'm currently progressing on during my train travels and during my travels in general. But this is definitely a foundation that I believe is important, so I am working on this one. And this one actually is also a work in progress, but I have been working on it for a bit longer. The Artist's Way, funnily enough, was recommended to me by entrepreneur friends who told me that it was useful in their business life. And this, of course, intrigued me because I work for myself. I also live the entrepreneur life, and I really was interested in anything that helps me develop my creativity, my confidence, brings more alignment, and all of these things were promised to me with this book. So I plunged into it, and actually I went into it very skeptical but open-minded. So I went in as a happy skeptic, someone who says, well, I don't believe in it, but I want to try it. So I kind of went in as a skeptic wanting to have fun. And I actually really enjoyed it. The reading is simple, but the exercises are actually quite a chunk. So each week you get given assignments, and you get given daily assignments as well. So one of the daily assignments that you begin at the beginning of the book is doing daily morning pages. And this practice I am no longer as dedicated with it as I was in the beginning. In the beginning, it was religiously every single day. I now do it about 80% of days, but I still do it more days than not. And I have noticed actually a huge benefit to me from the morning pages in terms of clarity of thoughts, vision for my day, vision for my near to midterm future, and in terms of mood and stability. So I have actually found the morning pages, surprisingly enough, to be a very balancing and helpful exercise. Another one I have found useful have been the weekly artist dates, but I have a lot of trouble actually doing them. The times that I do hold myself to it, I love them, but the truth is I do artist dates maybe once a month instead of once a week. The rest of it, there's a lot of journaling, a lot of prompts to work through, and a lot of affirmations. And the progression of it is very nice. Each chapter focuses on a different part of unblocking your creativity and unblocking your belief in yourself as a creator. This is interesting because you can work with it as a creator and not necessarily as an artist. And for someone creating a life, a project, a business, I find it valuable in its flexibility. So actually I found that it has helped me in my clarity for my professional projects and also in my confidence in my professional endeavors as well. I feel more creative, I feel more calm, I feel more confident, and it's given me more time, dedicated time to reflect on this and build ideas on this. So I've actually found it useful in a professional sense, which is why I wanted to mention it. And I really enjoy a book that has several sides to it. And also it was a good excuse to say, oh, well, I have an artist's date every now and then, I have to sneak off. Or it's my morning pages, now is my quiet time. So it's also nice having a book that holds you accountable for personal development and giving yourself space and time for that. I haven't gotten to the end yet. I have been doing this for a few weeks now. It's been 8 weeks roughly, and I am working at my own pace. I'm not necessarily doing one chapter a week. There are some weeks where I stay on a chapter for 2 weeks because I feel like I haven't had time to work through all the prompts that I want to, or I feel like there is more work to be done in that segment. So I'm working through it at my own pace, which I recommend. Some of the chapters will feel like you can finish them in 2 days. But some of the other chapters definitely feel like they deserve 2 weeks or maybe even longer for me to fully go to the depths that I want to on those topics. So that is something that I did not ever imagine myself recommending, yet I am. If you're not familiar with it, give it a try, because a lot of people talk about it and it is worth looking at and making your own opinion. I actually really loved it. The last book is on my to-read list. This one just arrived as well. So it's a new purchase, but it's one that I wanted to mention because I truly love the personality. Rick Rubin, every time I have been exposed to interviews or writings, extracts from him, I have found him to be very wise, very interesting. And The Creative Act is a book that has received a lot of attention and a lot of praise, and a lot of people that I admire and respect have claimed that this book has helped them find certain elements of their path, which is why I wanted to share it. Is that if you want to know what my reading list looks like, this is my next one on the reading list. And you're now up to date with the official book club of summer 2024. This collection will probably keep on growing, and I might share it when it grows some more. If you have any questions about any of the books or any other recommendations, I am very interested in them, and I would love to hear what you are reading or what you recommend, and drop me a line in the comments. If you have gotten this far, thank you so much for your support. You are amazing. And leave me in the comments a word so that I know that you've made it this far. And today let's make that word creative, from the creative act. And we have been talking about creative endeavors. So leave me creative in the comments if you want to let me know you've made it this far. If you have, thank you, I love you, and I hope to see you in a video soon. Bye!